بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. جزاكم الله خير and thank you for joining Sheikh Amer and myself for what I believe will be a fascinating journey and a great use of our time this evening, inshallah, whereby we will get a glimpse of somebody who has been and still is contributing a lot to Islam in the UK and more specifically in Scotland, inshallah. For some of us, we may not know who Sheikh Amer is, but this is an opportunity for those listening to become, or to get to know the work that he is doing, inshallah, and obviously to benefit from his work, inshallah ta'ala. Just a couple of things. If we could have people, any questions to be sent either directly to myself or Tabarak, which is called Tab. Please do not send any questions to Sheikh Amer, and that's because we want him to be focused and listening to what and focusing on what he needs to be discussing. So do not distract him, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, khair, inshallah. Sheikh Amer, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu rahmatullah.
Inshallah. I believe you've got the link now, right?
Yeah, I'm just sharing it right now.
Bismillah. I'll give you a few seconds to do that, and I'll do the same as well.
Right, inshallah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Bismillah.
Here. Okay. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, we know your name, Sheikh Amer, but if you can just tell us a little bit about your upbringing, inshallah ta'ala, and yeah.
Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulullah. Yeah, alhamdulillah. I was, I think, born in the same year that Sheikh Hamza became Muslim. So that's one way of remembering it. So yeah, born brought up in Glasgow. I lived in a predominantly non-Muslim area, white area. So growing up, I was kind of the only Asian in the class. And that was the case more or less throughout my schooling years. As I went into kind of higher education, secondary, so there was a few more Muslims, but generally in my particular year, I've always been a minority. So I'm sure that's probably played a role in you know, the way I became, because obviously when you're a minority, I remember at that time, I mean, we're talking about racism these days, but at that time it was very, very real, and it wasn't taken as seriously as it is now. So I think growing up, racism was just, you had to just take it in the chin. I mean, it was, you know, it was a daily occurrence, and being a minority, you're in that kind of situation where if you didn't stand up for yourself, you'd be taken advantage of. So I found Asians in my upbringing in school and so on fell into two categories. You had those who were, you know, seen to be weaker, so they'd get picked on, and you know, if you show that you're weak, it would just lead to more bullying. And then there was other types who stood up. Sometimes you'd get beaten up. Sometimes, you know, you'd be in the wrong end, but you'd earn the respect of people. They knew that you would fight back. So that was me. I would fight back. I would make a stand, and I think because of that, then a certain respect was gained with like my friends and stuff. So I actually got to a point where I didn't really need to get into that many fights because you had a reputation, and physically I was kind of good at sports. So any sport that I did, I was physically quite good at it. I was good at football, I was good at rugby, cricket. So alhamdulillah, I was blessed in that sense. So when you're kind of in physical, tussles with other people who are seen as quite strong in the crowd. If you're like, we used to do wrestling, we used to do basketball, all that kind of stuff. So they saw that you were strong and you could take care of yourself. So I think that was quite important in that era, where, really, if you didn't stand up, you'd just get taken advantage of. And I saw that from other people. So just normal upbringing, probably very cultural family. We didn't really pray. We prayed your Jummah. You would pray Eid, obviously, very, very important Eid prayer. Taraweeh was obviously important because Ramadan was the kind of 1 month you kind of behaved yourself. You did what you're supposed to do. The rest of the year, I remember we used to have this almost. It's almost like a cultural thing that we say in Punjabi, Panj Waqt Namazi, which basically means like, oh my God, he prays 5 times a day. So that was like a really high standard, right? So if somebody prayed 5 times a day, it was like he was the exception, or she was the exception from everyone, and it'd be made a point that person prays 5 times a day. That person's like a wali, right? You need to ask that person to make du'as. So that's the kind of culture I was brought up in. So I didn't really understand the importance of prayer and these other things. But I did know I was Muslim. So, I knew that we can't eat pork, we don't drink alcohol, those kind of things. And I think what probably played a big role was my father in particular was a strong person, and I think he knew, because we were in an area where everybody around me was non-Muslim. He was like a hawk, like he kept his eye on all of us. So he would really keep tabs. I mean, this is days before you had WhatsApp and all these other instruments which can you can track people. But subhanallah, I mean, I don't know what he'd do with the technology today, because you'd come home and say, what have you been up to today? And you'd say, I've done this and that, and he'd say, is that it? You say, yeah, and then he'd catch you out. He'd get to a point where he'd say, when you've exhausted everything you've said, he'd say, like, okay, so where were you at 4 o'clock? What were you doing at 4 o'clock on a particular street? And you're like, how does he know that? How did he know that? So it's like, people would obviously tell him, it'd get back to him. I think that's also another phenomena I think we've now lost, which was, I would say, community parenting. So, like back in the village, yeah, if you were living in a village, the parental responsibility was shared amongst the group. So if an elder saw you doing something wrong, he had no hesitation to say, what are you doing? Right? You shouldn't be doing that. And he knew that the father would back the other elder up. We're in a time where now we're afraid to do that, because we're not sure whether that parent would back you up. But I think that was the thing, at that time, there was still that understanding that if an elder said you'd been up to no good, and I said, no, I wasn't, my father would believe the elder. So they had this kind of, and this is maybe it's because of the populations increased so much, but at that time they had this quite close bond between my father, his friends, and so on, and they didn't hesitate to tell each other's kids off, and they kind of understood that they're doing it for their betterment. So that's something we've lost, I think. Definitely we've lost that now, but that was something I remember. So just normal upbringing, went through school, wasn't particularly bright. And then my father, because I was actually in quite a rough area. I mean, most of the people that went to primary school with me ended up like in prison and taking drugs and all that kind of stuff. I mean, none of them were high achievers by any means. And so what happened was, my sisters had gone to my older sister had gone to high school. And when she went to high school, she faced a lot of racism. So my father took her out and put her into a private education, to Al Guru school. And so then when I came to the end of my primary education, he did the same with me. He put me into a private school for boys. So my higher education was a lot better. And then after I finished school, I went to university to do law. And then about the end of second year, after 2 years, that's when I wanted to make a shift and go towards studying Islamic studies. And my dad wasn't happy.
Right. Tell us about that shift. I think that's
Yeah.
quite important. I mean,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
shift doesn't come normally. Most people who are studying law, probably you could argue that the last thing on their mind is going to study abroad. For them, it's finishing that, going to the relevant, what you have to do afterwards to graduate to the bar and so on and so forth, and
yeah.
getting into a firm and all that. You've taken a whole different route that 9 times out of 10 people would not be taking.
True. Yeah. So basically, I think what happened is, up until university, I wouldn't classify myself as, I don't even like the term practicing Muslim, because I don't really know what it means anymore, because if somebody's praying but the backbite, are they practicing? Someone doesn't pray but they're like really good akhlaq. So I just think that everyone's practicing to some level. We're just different levels. So I don't like that term anymore. But let's just say I wasn't praying, I wasn't doing the outward rituals that you'd associate as somebody who's quote unquote practicing. Very basic understanding of Islam, very cultural. Went into university, got some more Muslim friends, still had non-Muslim friends, joined Islamic society. I joined lots of societies, so I was, trying lots of things. And then I think what happened was, in second year of the course, I think there's also, as you know, that so many people that start university doing a course and then it's not really what they want to do. So I think it's very difficult when you're that young, to 16, 17, to decide what you want to do for the rest of your life. And as obviously now we're older, we've seen so many people in our lives who've started off doing one career and then ended up doing something else. So what happened was, I thought at 18, yeah, I'm going to do this law degree. I'm going to become a solicitor. In a few years, I'll have my own partnership, etc., etc. I'd mapped out my life. But it very quickly changed. So in second year, I started to pray. So maybe probably through the Islamic society, through mixing with other people, seeing other people practicing, I became a bit more practicing myself. And then at the end of that year is probably what was the main shift. What happened was, I attended, this is in 1996, I attended the Rihla course, which you were mentioning, I think, last week with Sheikh Harun. I think I did the one after him. So it was the Ibn Abbas Institute, Sheikh Ibrahim OCF. I didn't know who he was. And there's a brother in Glasgow who runs an organization here. And he said, look, there's this Arabic course going on in the summer, and I know the organizer, and it's a 1 month course. What do you think about attending it? I thought, yeah, why not? It's a summer, I might as well give it a bash, learn some Arabic. Why not? So I'm now 19 at this point. So I'm 19. I go to this course in Retford. It was in that Jamil Karam place. I didn't know. I still didn't have much knowledge. I didn't know what Jamil Karam is. I didn't know all these kind of nuances between the different groups. So I get there, and all these young people, kind of my age, we were maybe slightly kind of, in the 20s, you'd say. And they're all like, a lot more practicing than me, a lot more knowledgeable than me. They're like, arguing with each other, who, following a school of thought. I didn't know what was going on. I was like, well, I'm in the wrong place here. Following a school of thought, Ikhwan movement, this movement, that movement, HT. I was like, I didn't know any of these things. So I'm just like listening to all these young guys, obviously very committed. And I'm thinking, man, I'm nowhere, compared to these guys. So then I'm introduced to Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, who, again, like Sheikh Harun kind of alluded to last week, wasn't really well known that time. So he's just coming on the scene. So he's there. I'm introduced to Sheikh Noor Amin Keller, never heard of him before. His wife, Ustada Besa, and another Sheikh Qadi, something like it's a Saudi Sheikh.
Qadi.
Huh?
Abdullah Qadi.
Yes, that's right, Sheikh Abdullah Qadi. So there's basically 4 teachers. I'm there for a month. And these people are like hardcore. I'm like, these guys but they need to relax a bit, they need to chill a bit. So I did that for a month, and I think that was what the main impact that happened in my life at that point, because Sheikh Hamza was again the first scholar that we saw who, you know, was making Islam relevant and making sense of our situation in the West. So as a Western Muslim, you know, he was well read in the Islamic tradition. He had the Arabic. He had he was well read in the Western tradition. He was merging the two together, and he's showing you Islamic influence and basically making just sense of everything. And everything he taught made complete sense. Whereas before you went to the mosque, the Imam had knowledge, absolutely, but there was a disconnect. He's talking about something, you've got something else in your mind. There's obviously a language barrier, and you just couldn't connect. You didn't think he gets he understands what I'm going through. Sheikh Hamza, you felt that. Sheikh Noor again was a convert, so again he had embraced Islam and he'd learnt the tradition, so he understood the West as well. So that was my kind of introduction to traditional Islam, following a school of thought, all of this stuff going on in between classes, all this discussion going on between people. Seemed to be that we're all kind of confused and trying to find the right way. And I think with Sheikh Hamza, he kind of set the scene by, like Sheikh Harun was saying last week, that a lot of people through him were inspired to go and study, because he said, look, okay, all of you guys, what you're studying, law, you know, the usual stuff people studied, law, medicine, pharmacy, whatever the accountancy, the stuff that our kind of parents wanted us to do, professional jobs. And he said, look, what impact are you going to have on the ummah doing that? There's so many lawyers, there's so many doctors, there's so many dentists, there's so many, all these things. But what we don't have is religious scholars. Like, who is going to take this knowledge to the next generation? Like, who's going to teach? Like, you're all confused. Who's going to teach the next batch of confused young people? Who's going to lead them? And if some of you don't go out to study, right, then who are going to be the next, like, kind of religious leaders that are going to guide the ummah? And that really made me think a lot, because I certainly did not feel that I was the right person to become a religious scholar. I didn't feel I was practicing enough for a start. Another thing was I didn't feel that I had the intellectual capacity, the oratory capacity, all these things, like all the skill set. You know, you see someone like Sheikh Hamza, he's got a brilliant memory, he's like very eloquent, you know, he's just like, he knows that, he just seemed to know everything, when he could speak in any subject. And I thought, that's the kind of person you need, right? I can't really do that. But what I felt was, when I came back and I went back to university, I'm now in third year of my university, I'm then starting to, that message that he'd kind of sowed in so many of our hearts, that was kind of replaying in my mind, that what am I going to do with this law degree? I'm looking at all these young people, we're all kind of confused. Some people are going this way, some people are going that way. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm not the right person, but I can at least make an attempt. If I fail, I fail, but, you know, I'll give it a shot. And the thing was, at that time, the discussions I had with people were, well, why do you want to do that? Like, you can become a lawyer and earn a lot of money, right? A lot of money. Or you're going to become an imam and not earn a lot of money, right? You're going to be the low end of the ladder. You're going to get messed about by mosque committees, you know. And I think that's what the initial reaction of my father was. He was quite disappointed that I wanted to do that, because from him, he'd worked very hard. He'd paid for my higher education, especially. You know, I was doing law. It would have been a great career. And he's thinking, you're going to throw all that away and become an imam, who he obviously was a lot older in the community, knows that they get messed about, they get paid peanuts. How are you going to look after your family, etc.? So he just kind of thought that I've been brainwashed by some religious or some guys with big beards, right? And I'm not thinking straight. I'm young. I'm not thinking, about my future. So he wasn't too happy. And but the thing was, and I remember maybe it was him or a few other people said, look, why are you doing it? Let someone else do it. Let someone else do it, because if they mess it up, then you'll know not to do it, right? So I thought, because in the sense, basically, you go down the route that's been paved for you. It's a lucrative career. Everything's set up for you. Why take the risk and do something which you're unsure where it's leading, and you might end up coming back and you can't get a job and so on. So let someone else do it. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, what's so special about me that I shouldn't take that risk? Why should someone else take the risk? Like, I'm not any more important than the second person. So I thought, okay, let me have a stab at this. And I remember speaking to my kind of careers advisor person in the law department. It was a criminal. She was a criminal law lecturer. I mean, I can't remember her name, but I can remember that meeting, being with her, elderly woman, and I just said, look, this is what I'm thinking. I don't know what I should do. And she just said, look, do what your heart inclines towards. Do what your heart's in. If your heart's not in it, then this is not for you. And I thought to myself, okay. And she said, look, why don't you take a year out, see how it goes? If it doesn't work out, you can always come back. So I thought, okay, that's a good idea. So I told my parents, I said, look, all I'm doing is taking a year out, right? I'm not finishing. I'm taking a year out. I'm just going to see how this goes, and then we'll take it from there. And that kind of placated them for a while, because they thought, well, okay, fair enough. He's just going for a year. He'll get out of his system. He'll come back. He'll knock some sense into him. So I thought, fine. So I finished my third year. By that time, I'd really got into my deen. I was like part of the Islamic Society. I was the vice president, so I was doing a lot of stuff with the Islamic Society at Strathclyde University. And then straight after that, I thought, right, I'm going to go and study. So obviously, the first thing you need to do is study Arabic.
What was the university scene like then? Because obviously, there's several of our listeners today are students at university, and some of them are part of the Islamic Society. So it'd be interesting just to hear just a few moments. I mean, what was the scene like back then?
What do you mean by scene like?
Like the university, ISOC.
I mean, yeah. So that time, we were fortunate because the university had given us a prayer room. So out of all the universities in Glasgow, we were the only one that had a prayer room. I think that had a big impact, because that meant people could come there and pray and eat lunch and so on. And a lot of the people that used it were kind of older master's, PhD students from abroad, kind of from the Arab world, Malaysia, and so on. I think at that time, the identity, and I discussed this with my brother, slightly older than me, and what he says is that at that time, we were kind of going through a bit of an identity crisis, because our parents from back home, right, we're speaking a different language in the home. They really don't know what we're going through in our education and our kind of outside world. So there's a limit to how much they can help you. They can provide for you, but they've not been through the education system, so they can't advise you on what you should do, what you shouldn't do. There weren't enough people that had gone before us who could advise us either. So we were almost like we were kind of the first kind of generation that were kind of testing the waters. And he said at that time, the predominant identity was more ethnic. It was like we're Asians rather than we're Muslims. So remember, he was involved with an Asian society at university. So there was kind of more of a cultural thing. And I think when we came along, because Islamic Society got this room, they started to establish a more kind of Islamic identity. But my kind of generation, kind of South Asians, young guys, we were all kind of lost, to be honest. A lot of us weren't practicing. We were just like, we kind of understood we're a group, we're a minority, but it was a kind of mix of Islam and a mix of culture and a mix of confusion and a mix of, we all had issues with our parents understanding them. So we were all kind of in the same boat, all kind of getting pushed towards studying, professional degrees. Going into careers. And I think this is what made the Islamic journey so difficult, because there was nobody I could ask. Like today, like for example, if a university student came to you and said, Sheikh, I'm thinking of studying and becoming a scholar, you could say, well, okay, you can study in this place, you can study this place, is this scholar, that scholar, these are the kind of books you do, this is how you go about doing it, these are your various options, etc., etc. I had nobody. There was no one that had gone before me that had done this. So it was like going into a no man's land, right? And this is a thing that because no one had done it, that gave anxiety to my parents, because they're like, well, we don't know where this leads to, because it wasn't it wasn't like I was going to a Dar Uloom where it's a set kind of sect and you're going into a mosque. So that's it. That's what you're going to do. That's not really what I wanted to do. So the next question was, what are you going to do? And the honest answer was, I have no idea. But that's not a very good answer to give to your parents, that I'm going to do something which I have no idea what I'm going to do at the end of it. So there was no one to get advice from. There was no one to ask, where do I go? What do I do? So that's, I think, what made the whole journey probably more difficult, but also interesting, because I ended up studying in many different places, because you're still trying to work out what am I supposed to be doing, who am I supposed to be studying with, and where am I, and ultimately, what is the path, and when do you know when you finished it, and so on.